So this is the whole city, conversations on community life and faith, full of interesting ideas and visions, hosted by Alex Joyner, a pastor and writer based in Charlottesville, Virginia. Claire Gilbert, welcome to the whole city. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So Dr. Claire Gilbert is a British historian and author whose novel Julian was published in 2023, just recently in paperback. And Claire, tell me a little bit about what you're doing these days, because you have a varied background.
I do indeed. Well, these days, quite recently, I stopped being the director of Westminster Abbey Institute for Ethics and Public Life. So, working with people in the institutions of government and Parliament and the judiciary around Parliament Square, where Westminster Abbey is, to support their moral resilience and give
Wow, that's a job.
give them the chance to think more deeply about what they're trying to do, because most of them are trying to do good and they're
Mhm.
not often credited with that. So we
Hmm.
thought we should offer them some support, and that was for people of all faiths and no faith. And that was a really, really rewarding job. I was the founder director, did it for 10 years. But towards the end of that time, I got cancer, and then I had a whole journey with Julian, which we'll no doubt talk about. And I ended up where I am now, which is as a writer. I do have a couple of roles. I've got a visiting professorship at King's College London, so a little bit of lecturing there. And I'm a lay canon at Norwich Cathedral, really
Hmm.
in recognition of the work with Julian. And
Hmm.
a little bit of lecturing and have a little bit of involvement there. But mainly, I sit at my desk and I'm now writing another historical fiction novel, but about a real character, a 6th century woman called Berta, who
Hmm.
made Augustine welcome when he arrived in 597 to convert the English. And
Hmm.
everybody's heard of Augustine, but nobody's heard of Berta. So I thought it's about time we heard her story.
Great. Well, I'm going to look forward to Bridget next. So, so you've got this academic background. You've run an institute. Don't you know that academics are not supposed to be able to write good prose?
It's a whole different ballgame. Well, to write stories. So,
Yes.
great principle, show, don't tell. You can't
Yes.
explain yourself in a novel, you have to show it. And it's hard, it was hard to make the switch.
Yeah. Did you have to unlearn some ways of writing in order to
Yeah,
enter this way? Yeah.
I really did. And I had some very, very good advice. A particular dear friend of mine, Laura Wilson, who's an excellent crime writer and young adult author,
Hmm.
who has really helped me, basically given me permission to ramp up the drama. Because as an academic, you're terribly cautious, aren't you, in everything?
Hmm.
But here she said, no, you've got to tell the story, which is, and that's what I did with Julian. It felt a bit risky. For an academic, that's risky, isn't it? But what I did do was make sure I could be as true to what historical facts we do have, which are not many, and that satisfied my academic soul. And after that, no, I let rip. And it was actually, in the end, it was glorious to use
Hmm.
my creative imagination. I also think that there's a way in which you can come almost closer to the truth about somebody using your creative imagination than if you're
Hmm.
trying to record facts.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So this was, I mean, well, first of all, were you tempted ever to write this as a straight history or biography? Or was the genesis of this, you really wanted the freedom to explore her this way?
Well, the genesis of it was a kind of call. Um, No, so to answer the first part of your question, I never was tempted to write a straight biography. I don't think anybody could, because we really do know almost nothing about Julian of Norwich. We just have the text, and even that's a tiny bit questionable because the manuscripts are all much later than
Mhm.
when in the text she said she had her visions. We know there was an anchoress called Julian at the end of the 14th, beginning of the 15th century, but you can't for absolute certainty put the two together, the text and the woman. So there's always going to be a question mark about Julian. I personally think she would quite like that. So I never thought, I thought if, So the thing about Julian is basically you fall in love with her. That's what happens when you encounter her,
Hmm.
my experience. If you're going to have any
Hmm.
kind of a relationship with her, it's full of love. That's what she.
Hmm.
And to do something dry just doesn't work. But I had this particular such it was such a strong sense with her to do her homage because she had, having been the subject of my academic research, that's what my doctorate was on in relation to the environmental crisis, Julian and the environmental crisis. I then got cancer, and she stopped being the subject of my academic research and became my spiritual companion and guide through 2.5 years of really grueling cancer treatment.
Mm.
I also wrote about that, and I wrote about her and the way she guided me in that as letters to friends. But the at the end of the treatment, it was honestly like hearing a call, Alex, to tell her story as an act of homage to her.
Mm.
Knew that it was going to have to be a novel because if I was going to bring her to life as a human being, I would have to find her in my creative imagination. There's not document there aren't documents around to, or very few documents around to help. Um, and um, and I and I thought she might not let me. I also wanted to. She did. Well, at least it came out. You're reading it, so hopefully that's okay. But I also in the so to talk about moving from writing as an academic to writing in the way I write now. Uh, in writing to my letters about the cancer, I sort of I made this deal with them, and the idea they have been published, but that wasn't why I was writing them. What I said was, you know, when you're really close to somebody who's suffering and you really want to do something to help, and you don't know what to do, um, and so I said, this is what you can do for me to my friends and my family.
Mm.
I said, you can read what I write about this, and I don't want to have to edit it and make it sanitized, and I want to be able to just put down on paper what I'm going through. And bless them, my dear readers, as they became, they did, or most of them did, or if they didn't tell me. And I found that a deep, deep voice, writer's voice, in doing that. And so in writing Julian's story, I wanted to write with that same deep voice, which is how it ended up being a fictional autobiography. I mean, what a cheek to not only tell her story when she says in her text, "I don't want you to look at me. This is not about me. It's about
Uh-huh.
visions. You look at the visions." There I was ignoring that plea, but also making her voice my own, or my own voice hers. So it felt very audacious.
Well, I think it takes some audacity just to put yourself back in the 14th century in the first place, and to try to do that. But what I really admired about the way you wrote the book was, and the way you framed it, was that you really brought to life not only her, but the environment that she was living in too, um, and a civilization that was going through the plague, the Black Plague, and the um, English nationalism starting to rise, and conflicts within the church. Um, so how did you frame how did you come to this frame to tell the story?
I think I was immensely helped by the strong sense that the 14th century might be 600 years ago, but what the people were going through at that time was not a million miles from what we are and were going through. There's a sense, I had this sense that the 14th century and the 21st century have a kind of kinship. And of course, we had the pandemic. We certainly had social unrest. Um, I mean, it's not heresy and not called heresy and sedition from the church today, but we still have this notion of what you can't say, and we've become very afraid of our of language, for in some cases very good reason. I want to say that,
Yeah.
but uh, I didn't feel it was a million miles away, even though it was 600 years ago. Of course, I had to understand some of the historical events. But it was very much in my mind that I wanted to bring this woman, this extraordinary woman, into our century and help us in this century, as I had asked her to do, as it were, in my doctoral thesis in relation to the environment. That this is a great mind and a great heart and beautiful poetic words. How can it help us address the questions of today? And I
Right.
wanted to see if it was possible to make sense to a 21st century mind, such a mad thing as A, to have visions, and then B, to go and lock yourself in a room out for decades,
Yes.
without ever coming out again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would why would you do that? Could I tell a story where that choice made sense?
Yeah. I feel that challenge really closely right now because I'm trying to do a 5 week series on Julian here during Lent and trying to make the case that, what has this 14th century mystic got to say to the 21st century lifestyle? And I think your book does that very effectively. And I can only hope to do the same. So we haven't said a whole lot to set up who Julian is. And as you say, we don't know a whole lot about her. We do know that she left behind this great written work, which is now called The Revelations of Divine Love, which seems to have been, like a lot of writings by women mystics of the period, something that she dictated to a confessor, and your book is set up that way to dictate as she tells her story. She's telling it to Thomas, who became very close to her as she was in the anchor hold. So, but she also,
Just to say,
you want to say that? Yes,
I don't think so. I imagined Thomas, this
yes,
who is actually one of her legators in actual historical fact. She's right. So I
right,
made him this character in the story. I have him noting down what she talks about right at the
yeah,
beginning, because we have the short text, don't we? There's the short text and the long text of the Revelations, and I have him writing down what becomes the short text. But then it's very important to me and my sense of who Julian is that she herself writes the longer text, and she does it in the
yes.
safety of her anchor hold. But yes, then the story I Julian is her speaking again to Thomas, and he writes that down. So
Right, right. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, because yeah, so she has these. The short version becomes over the course of many years the longer version that really goes into a lot of depth. But you also put her in a community, and the Elm Hill women who in the book, um, who I take it represent a lot of lay women communities throughout Europe at the time, the Beguines, and that era of women doing theology and ministry outside of official sanction. So, how much historical grounding do you have for those kind of communities in East Anglia at the time?
Uh,
Yeah.
So the house on Elm Hill exists. It's there. You can go and see it today.
Oh, great.
But
Okay.
we know four women lived there together as kind of, I suppose, proto Beguines or like Beguines. They
Hmm.
didn't call themselves Beguines, but it was very much in that
Hmm.
model of a group of women living together, living holy lives, serving the community, but not under any kind of formal rules. So not nuns. Uh, but and I do say this at the end of the book, that house is 15th century and they were in the 15th century. So I brought them into the 14th century because I
Mm.
wanted Julian to have contact with educated women. There's also this is a nice mixture of dealing with a if you like a problem of the text or a question of the text, and history coming to help. That I thought if Julian is going to write her book, she's going to need paper, so you don't just buy notebooks from, the local stationer,
Right.
obviously. So what I learned from a friend of mine, historian of the period, Michelle Brown, that parchmenting, the creating of parchment, was one of the few trades open to women at the time. So these women in the Elm Hill community, I have them as parchmenters, and that's how they make their living. They create parchment, and then they can be the ones who provide Julian with her paper for when she comes, or parchment for when she comes to write down Revelations of Divine Love a bit later.
Right.
But they also, I have them copying texts, and that's how Julian comes to comes to encounter things like the cloud of unknowing, and you know that if you read
Mm.
the commentaries on Julian's text on Revelations of Divine Love, people differ in their views, but all sorts of influences are detected there. Of course, she doesn't give footnotes and say where she got her ideas from, but you can see traces of Augustine and Cloud of Unknowing, Boethius, all sorts of other theologians of the time. Um, and certainly some scholars think she must have been educated. She must have gone to a convent and been taught, or but others think that she may just, and this is more what I think, she may just have been very exposed to or exposed herself to the lay preaching, of which we know there was a lot in Norwich at the time. Norwich was a very big, important city, second only to London in medieval
Mm.
time. So lots of different monastic communities were coming and were there, and particularly the Dominicans, very hot on preaching to the laity. So she would have heard sermons, and those sermons would have been formed by the theologians of the day. So I have her doing that as well. But yes, the women, and so it's not just the ex source of her parchment and exposure to these texts, but also exposure to a way of living a Christian life of
Mm.
depth as a woman that isn't bound basically within the structures set up by men.
Right, and they give her a lot of encouragement to to follow these visions where they will lead. Um, and then they develop a kind of close relationships. It makes it kind of poignant when then makes the decision to move into the anchor hold and trades some of that female solidarity with the for another kind of life. Although, as you depict the anchor hold, it's not nearly as isolating as you might as I imagined. That
Indeed,
there are always people coming and going.
always. And that's broadly true of the role of the life of the anchorite, male and female. So yes, they are enclosed in a space, and it's their coffin, their first death. They never come out, but there's a window to the world. There's a window to the church, there's a window to the servant, because someone has to bring their food and take away their waste. And there's a window to the world. And in the Ankrina Wis, the guide for anchoresses, it's stated as one of the roles and responsibilities of an anchorite to um, to give counsel. So you can almost think of them as early spiritual directors, because it's lay counsel, which is why the bishop gets very suspicious of it.
Right.
But yes, very much porous to the world. Very much. You almost feel. Well, she says, "I can draw the curtain, and the world
Uh-huh.
goes away." That's one of the reasons I'm here. But it sure as comes, and there are loads of. And when Julian became an anchoress, I mean, this is the historical thing. There were just maybe one or two others in Norwich, but by the next century there were about 50, which implies that just about every church in Norwich had its own hermit. It was a
Yeah, it was a thing. Yeah. And she kind of gets, is kind of co-opted or people try to co-opt her into their causes. The Julian you portray has a great love for the church, but also sees it as incredibly wounded by the ways that it has treated women, the ways that it has fallen into heresy trials and all of that. But also she's being co-opted by the Lollard movement, which was trying to reform or break away from the church at the same time. And she kind of navigates between them and doesn't doesn't throw in with any lot. How did you come to that picture of her?
Well, I did think about that quite a lot, and I partly ended up here because qu- people today do the same thing. The
Mm.
um, Protestants say she's theirs, and the
Hmm.
Catholics say she's theirs. uh, and there's good reason to think both those things. So I think the thing that's puzzling with the text Revelations of Divine Love is she she really does see things in her visions that the church doesn't show her, doesn't teach her, that look
Mhm.
heretical. Like, for example, she says, I don't see sin. She says to God, where is sin if I don't see it in you? Because I don't see it in you. She says, the church teaches me about the damned, and she lists them. She says, but I didn't see them. I was not shown the damned. Um, Jesus as mother, God as mother, although I understand from medievalists that that wasn't particularly unusual in
Yeah.
her. Um, so that's not necessarily going to be regarded as heretical, but still, verging on a bit dangerous.
Maybe more heretical today
Yeah,
in some circles. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's a very good
Mm-hmm.
point. And she, uh, yeah, so and she basically it's just this outpouring of love and the sense, the famous vision of the little hazelnut thing the size of a hazelnut in the palm of her hand. That's one of her visions. She sees something the size of a hazelnut in the palm of her hand, and she's given to understand that is everything that is made. And she says, I looked at it full of wonder. I could not see. It was so fragile how it could stay, how it could last. And she understood, she was given to understand that it lasts because God loves it. And she understands from that that God can never be wrath,
Yeah.
have wrath.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if God stopped loving this tiny little thing, and of course we today would think of planet Earth,
Yeah.
stop loving it for one moment, it would fall.
Yeah.
So these are quite dangerous thoughts to for her to have. But she again and again and again in the text she says, "I do not abandon Holy Church. I I I do not ask you to leave the teaching of Holy Church." I mean, you might say the lady doth protest too much, and maybe that's the case.
Uh-huh.
But you to be true to her as I see her in the text, I couldn't have her just saying, "Oh well, no, that's I'll go off. I'll encourage the lollards. Yeah, let's have a revolution."
Uh-huh.
It just doesn't seem to be in her makeup at all.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, she navigated, and also not being, oh Lord, isn't this relevant for today? Not being co-opted into
Yeah.
one side or the other because you can't be in the middle. You can't
Right.
hear the merit on both sides. You've got to choose, and we know that means we jettison, we lose truth, because
Yeah.
the truth is never just one thing or the other. If the other has merit in it,
Yeah. And she kind of models that just by her physical location. I love the passage where you talked about her moving into the anchor hole in part so that she could be close enough to the church that she couldn't be considered heretical, but yet walled off from it in a way so that she had some independent space in which to explore. So intentionally choosing the margin. Yeah.
it's very good.
Yeah. So you have a passage that I hope I can get you to read that where Julian makes it sound like that as she diagnoses what's going on with the society of her time, it is a direct response to all the grief that came and the loss and change that came through the Black Plague, which was ongoing in her lifetime, that people couldn't bear to grieve what the plague had taken, and so they turned that into fury at each other. So, would you mind reading us that passage, or at least a part of it that begins on page 274?
Yes, of course. I, and I'm bound to say, as I was writing this, I was thinking about our situation with the pandemic.
Well, I was going to ask that.
Beg your pardon.
Yeah, no, yeah,
But it really, because I felt it. In my mind, I understand that the zealous anger is born not of the truth of Holy Church, but of the grief the pestilence brought upon us. It was devastating, but no one speaks of it now. I do not believe that the grief has abated. I feel it in myself, in my own loss, which stays with me and always will. Our children, who are our hope, were taken from us, our hope. But we have suppressed our grief. Perhaps, I think, we cannot bear the realization that we were helpless to avoid the pitiless scourge, that our prayers and our tears and our clever physic were powerless. So we ask why it happened, and Holy Church has told us that the pestilence was God's will. But this is empty reasoning, without heart, explaining nothing, comforting no one, only distancing God in a cloud of wrath.
Mm.
Oh, Holy, bit more?
Yeah, please.
Holy Church does not speak of Christ's wounds as God's wounds, of God knowing our pain as his own. And instead of giving ourselves time to grieve and time to learn what the pain and the loss and the helplessness mean, we have turned our faces towards other things that we think we can control, like sedition and heresy, and let the fury that was in truth grief grow in us against each other. I feel impotent in the face of the fiends that are in Holy Church and are stalking the land, eating men's souls. But the impotence has its own power, because resistance to the anger only breeds more anger, and I can resist nothing. I have been stripped of my facade of holiness to protect and pretend. No outer skin, no thick membrane, a pale newborn soul, utterly porous to the world and to God, almost transparent, but not without the sense to deflect evil when it comes poking at my cell. I have not before prayed so deeply, nor have I found such a quick wit, a ready laugh, storms of cleansing tears, and a new restful confidence, not in me, but in love, steadfast love.
Mm. Yeah, that is beautiful.
Thank you.
And undeniably resonant with our own time. So,
You know,
uh,
I don't know about what if this is happening in the States, but we're having these reviews of the COVID, having a COVID inquiry, right?
yes.
And it's so much get ends up being wanting to find someone to blame,
Mm.
and you just feel the anger. It's not it, well, it is anger now, but it comes out of grief, and the thing to address is the grief,
Hmm.
not find someone to beat up. It's not going to make you. It's not going to make it the grief go away.
Yeah,
It's going to increase our unhappiness.
it does. It reminds me of how I felt after 9/11 here in 2001 and how quickly we turned grief into a war, you know. So, um, and uh, and and that the sense that you write about there, that the fury is really in truth grief, and our our the hard time we have in facing that.
I
So,
think it's such a hard thing, isn't it, to for these things, bad things happen to good people, the bad things happen, and you can't do anything about it.
yeah,
That's what I think the I put it like this, the genius of the Christian story,
yeah,
that the risen Christ is wounded.
yeah.
You sit with the wounds, you stay with the wounds, you allow yours, it makes you porous, it makes you open to what's around you, not closed.
Christ, yeah. Christ wounds are God's wounds. Can you say a word about that? Because I think that is one thing that will strike a modern reader reading this book is how gory Julian's vision is, because it really lingers on the suffering of Christ, and there's a lot of blood, and there's in the midst of that love. How do you hold that together or how does she hold that together?
Well, of course, for her, it's not that weird. I
Right.
mean, but medieval's, wallowed in the gore, you might say, and the paintings of the time of, lots and lots of blood, uh, and Christ's blood is a wonderful thing. We wash in it. It's sort of disgusting,
Yeah.
sort of washing in
Yeah.
the blood when you think of it literally, as I do, having
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
imagination. But but So my reception of it is to simply accept the imagery as she offers it. I don't think she's morbid. I think she's, as this is someone else's word, she's painterly. So
Mm.
her descriptions, for example, of the dying Christ, which yes, they do go on and on. It's a vision, right? It's what she's being
Yeah.
told in her, but his descriptions, as she talks about the drying skin like leather waving in the wind to dry, or the blood dripping down his head like rain off the eaves, or the scales of a herring. These are, really vivid images, and gory. But and she talks about the open side of Christ, and one of her visions is to enter into the open side of Christ, the pierced side where the spear pierces him. And I hear all this as a porosity, as a melting, a dissolving, as
Mm.
entering into the his wounds make him open, and we enter into him as he enters into us. It's a
Mm.
lovely softness of encounter that allows, if you like, interpenetration or transformation of our subjectivity, rather than, I don't know, uh, doing academic analysis can make you rather cold and argumentative, and fine, that has its place. Using your intellect, of course, it has its place. But what about falling in love? What about melting?
Mm.
What about
Mhm.
feeling it?
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. She comes through all of all of these visions, and comes up with the famous line, "All shall be well." And it's become a kind of spiritual bumper sticker. Comforting, a little vague, a little Pollyannish, maybe. But that phrase is not just covering over a multitude of sins, is it? It's doing a lot of work. What is it?
You might say she's earned. Not only say the right, right's the wrong, but she's earned the statement.
Hmm.
The all that is not well, that shall be well, is tremendous grief and pain, and a recognition of that in the world, and an openness to it, even in her little cell, being porous to the grief of the world, and uh, and a kind of phenomenal belief in God,
Mm.
just beyond everything, belief in God, that God will make it well. We can't see it. We have partial vision. We can't see it, but if you like, God knows just how awful it is, and God will make it well.
Yeah.
Uh, it's, you know, she came into English consciousness, having been strangely absent in the 20th century. So, 500 years after she'd had her visions and written her text, through T.S. Eliot, who
Mm.
quotes this line, "All shall be well," in Little Gidding, in his poem Little Gidding. And it's not just that he quotes her and everybody picked it up and then they started finding out who Julian of Norwich was. That whole poem is imbued with her spirituality. And you have the same sense with him. He was writing, I think, in the early 1940s with the whole wrenching European war experience, or World War experience, but what the
Right.
dreadful things that were happening in Nazi Germany, and the bombing, and uh, and you have the same sense with his use of it, this deep understanding that we don't say these words lightly. We earn the right to say them, and I commend Little Gidding actually as to read, because I think he's understood her in a way that a little bit closer to our time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back to that now. Um, I did want to touch just for a minute on how she uses the image of the feminine divine, we might call it today. You say, I think I've seen that too, that it was not so unusual perhaps to refer to Jesus as mother. There's a the whole kind of medieval theology that kind of built around that. But um, what, so what does that do for her yeah, in her setting? But also, how do you feel like that language, which is in some quarters controversial today, but also how could it speak to a 21st century world?
Well, in the book, I Julian, and this is my sense of the text, Revelations of Divine Love. She speaks of God as mother and of Christ as mother in different places, uh, and it and so just to be little bit more specific with Jesus, she talks about the blood from Jesus's pierced side being like the breast milk from a mother, and as a mother may lay her child tenderly to her breast, so Christ draws us tenderly to his side. Again, it's quite graphic,
Mm,
but one captures the sense of the tenderness of the love, and that she felt that the church was offering something that just had nothing of that love. It was telling them that the plague was their fault and this was sin and God is full of wrath for us. And I don't want to be stereotypical, particularly not these days, but you have this sense of the forbidding father whom you have to please and you have to um, make good your crimes and your sins, and the father stands there and he's frowning and it's all very formal and a bit scary, and then there's the love of a mother, and what she was encountering in her visions was much more like the love of a mother than the forbidding love, you might say, the tender love of a mother, forbidding love of the father. And that, look, I think this does speak to today. I just don't want to not include fathers, because fathers are absolutely brilliant as well. So much better understood, and sort of allowed to be like this. But that the love that you have for your child, which means it doesn't matter what the child does, it doesn't matter what they do, that love will never go.
yeah,
They can't destroy that love, even if they do everything filthy and appalling, and they cannot destroy that love. And this is
yeah,
the sense of motherhood I think she's conveying, that I sensed with her, and I think we can receive that today. Just
yeah,
don't genderify it too much, because
right.
you see that with men as
Yeah.
fathers.
Well, and she does that in that parable of the Lord and the servant, even though it's a
Thank
male
you.
male Lord. What you just described is exactly how she images God seeing us, is that, we fall in the ditch. And it's tempting to call it sin or something that might write us off, and yet the Lord never abandons the servant, never stops looking at him with that love. So yeah, yeah. Um, so uh, just one last question, but I do that, I just want to tell you that here at the church, at this congregation, we're doing this 5-week Lenten journey with Julian, and so we've installed window frames in in the sanctuary and the chapel. Actually, we got one window we're going to move back and forth, which is like a physical window frame, as a way of practicing what Julian practiced at her window, making space for people to be met where they are, to have conversation. And your book has been a part of how we think about that, because you have so many encounters at the window once Julian is in the anchor hold, so many friendships that are continued and developed, and relationships. A lot of emphasis on the importance of the female friendships, which helped everyone endure. So, what does it mean to you that Julian is still doing a work at the windows, this 14th century anchoress who's still opening windows?
Oh, well, I think you've said it. I mean, that's so beautiful what you've just described, really. And we do have to make the effort. We do have to have the open window and keep it open. Um, and receive people, receive each other, including ourselves, as we are.
Mm,
You know, um, this is active attention, I think might be a word for it. When
Mm,
you're listening and you're not you're not moving what you hear into a pigeonhole or a compartment or a place, but just listening. And in that listening, in that active, attentive, supportive listening, the words that are being spoken have the opportunity of transforming as the person speaks, because everybody's listening, both sides are listening so carefully. It makes you listen to what you say, and what you say can begin to transform and change, and revelations emerge in the encounter. That
yeah.
more than anything, that's what Julian teaches us, is about encounter, porosity of encounter,
Yeah.
which makes us open to transformation. And it's in the encounter that the transformation happens, not an idea afterwards, but unexpectedly, through loving listening.
Yes. That's beautiful. Anything else that you would offer us? I appreciate the time.
Oh, oh, I don't know. I think you've been wonderful to talk. Brilliant questions, and I love the fact that you're spending Lent with Julian. That's not because it's I think about how Lent can be, you
Yeah.
know, all about giving up and well,
Yeah.
okay, penitence. Let's talk about penitence, because
Yeah.
that is what Lent is for. It's a time of penitence,
Yeah.
reflection, of self-examination, to prepare ourselves for this wrenching Holy Week and all that that means, and this death, and then on the other side of the death, not before,
Yeah.
resurrection. So moving, being
Yeah.
preparing ourselves to move through the crucifixion into the resurrection. But the penitence that Julian invites us to is, it's an invitation to recognize perhaps partly our helplessness. We are so arrogant, we Westerners, post-Enlightenment, well, Enlightenment Westerners, are this idea of control. And controlling nature, and look what nature is saying. You think you're in control, I don't think you're. We're kind of rogue lords of the universe, and these it's awful arrogance that we've had about controlling the world and each other and nature and peoples. And uh to recognize, first of all, oh God, there's so much more to say about this. Sorry.
That's all right.
This Lord and servant parable, it's not that Adam, or the servant, was intending to be wicked. He was in a hurry to do, but he was in a hurry.
Yeah.
We're in such a hurry to control things and make the world as we want it to be, and we don't mean to get it wrong, but we do, and we
Yeah.
are arrogant. And so we need to recognize that it's not that we're all dreadful people, but recognize that we thought we knew what we were doing, and we really, really didn't, and we don't really know what to do, and that makes us helpless. And the feeling of helplessness makes us open.
Mm.
And the penitence, I'm sorry, I'm soft, I'm abashed, I'm my head is hanging, I'm I don't know what to do, and that opens us up to hitherto unimagined things. Because while we think we know, we're not going to see what we need to see to deal with the world as it is today, which is things we haven't seen before. Because we don't know how to deal with the problems of today. They're too enormous, they're too complex. And we cause them all. It's
Uh-huh.
absolutely mind blowing. So, penitence in this time, softness, and Julian really shows us how to be that. And no beating up, no, you know,
Yeah.
softness.
Yeah, and we didn't even get into her whole understanding of sin as behovely, that great word that somehow is fitting within this world, and we don't know how. But
You've
but
got
she
that.
does.
You've got that
What's
before in your time and your Lenten time with her.
That's right. Well, and just the image that all of these visions came to her initially when she was confronted with the cross, and as it was over her, as the last rites were given. So it's we live in the shadow of that, and we still learn. And so it feels like good to have her helping us go back to the cross that way.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful book. And again, it's I, Julian by Dr. Claire Gilbert. And it has been compared on the cover. Sarah Sands has a quote that is compared to Hilary Mantel's Cromwell trilogy, which is a fair comparison. I think it's very much that. Also, if you enjoyed Hamnet, I think Maggie O'Farrell's book does a similar thing that you do in trying to bring to life a part of English history and the lives of women in it. So thank you so much, and I wish you well, and hope that there's many more books to come.
Thank you, Alex. It's been a complete joy talking to you.